Good morning, everyone, and welcome you all to this session called Bridging the Gender Gap, Innovating Innovation in the Agri-Food Sector. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for being here today. My name is Lara Rodriguez. I will be the moderator for this panel. I am Innovation Project Manager in EIT Food CLC South and also the coordinator of Empowering Women in Agri-Food program, which is dedicated to early stage female-led startups in our sector. So initially, I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Giovanni Colombo, that will be tackling the major issue of the women representation in the sector and imbalances of it. Giovanni is the Senior Public Affairs Manager in EIT Food, and he will be giving us a short snapshot of the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lara, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to this session. So I'm here to have the panel to set the scene and share some food for thoughts. So let me start with the title of the session, Innovating Innovation. What does it mean? It means that we have to innovate the way we innovate and make it more inclusive. And women are currently underrepresented in the EU agri-food sector and in its innovation ecosystem. So my presentation will touch upon three main points. First of all, I will talk about some of the obstacles that women face in agri-food innovation and share some data to quantify the scale of the problem. I will explain why including women in agri-food innovation is not only the right thing to do, but also why it makes good economic and business sense. And then provide some updates on the work that EIT Food is currently doing to address this gap. Next. So diversity is a wide concept that includes several dimensions. Here we focus on the dimension of gender. And while we acknowledge that gender diversity is about more than the distinction between men and women, today we will be focusing specifically on the exclusion of women in the agri-food sector because it's a pervasive problem. And there are data also to know what the problem is and to understand what we need to do. So we cannot just sit on the data and do nothing. And we don't just need to talk about gender equality, we also need to achieve gender equity. Gender equality is about giving everyone the same thing, opportunity, irrespective of their starting conditions and their characteristics. But this works only if everyone is starting from the same level. Gender equity, on the other hand, is about fairness, giving everyone what they need in order to compensate for a different and less favorable starting condition and achieve equality. So it's about equality in the outcome. Next. We know that the food system is facing big challenges, and this has been reminded to us recently by the UN Food System Summit, by COP26, that once again has rang the alarm on climate change. We need to innovate to achieve the SDGs, and we are only 9 to 8 years away from 2030. But several factors are holding us back and limiting our ability to innovate, transform, and deliver economic and societal impact. One of these factors is gender inequality, which is still deep-rooted in our society. Women suffer from lack of access to decent work and face occupational segregation, gender wage gaps. In many situations, they are denied access to basic education, healthcare, are victims of violence, discrimination. They are underrepresented in political, economic decision-making processes and often are underrepresented also in agri-food innovation and entrepreneurship. But gender equality plays a crucial role as a driver of development progress, and this is why it's also included in the SDGs, in particular SDG 5 and SDG number 10. Therefore, if we hold women back, not only we will perpetrate an unfair system, but we will also be unable to realize the full potential of innovation to transform and improve food systems. So we need really to act. Next slide, please. So here I would like to share with you some data that talk about the scale of the problem. But let me say first that it's still quite difficult to find aggregate data at the EU level that talk about women participation in the agri-food sector. So this means that we are still partially in the darkness when we try to understand the problem, and therefore there is still a data gap that we need to fill before we can properly address the gender gap. However, let's have a look at the figures. So according to Eurostat figures from 2019, women represent 41% of the food chain workers from primary production down to food manufacturing and retail. And according to 2015 data from the European Institute for Gender Equality, there are also imbalances in farm ownership. Women own averagely smaller farms than men, and they represent only 27% of EU farms holders specializing in livestock rearing and crop production, and 24% of EU organic farm holders. Moreover, entrepreneurship, if we look at data on entrepreneurship and access to finance, a global study by AgFunder from 2019 indicates that only 16% of the agri-food tech deals were closed with startups with at least one female founder, but the figures go down to 7% for the deals that are entirely led by female-led startups, which correspond to a meager 3% of the total funds allocated to through these deals, which is quite alarming. Let's go to the next slide. Yes. In 2021, EIT Food conducted a qualitative study on female agri-food tech entrepreneurs. The study included 3 forms of primary research, an online survey with female entrepreneurs, 46 participants, then 3 focus groups with participants in our global food venture program, seedbed incubator, EIT Food accelerator, and also focus group with our community of scale-ups, the Rising Food Stars, and then interviews with investors to share the findings on the surveys and the focus groups and explore the potential intervention that EIT Food could take to improve gender gap. So the study showed some interesting results. So 75% of all the respondents have experienced negative gender bias in their life and or careers as entrepreneurs. 19% of the respondents stated such bias is holding them back professionally. 50% perceive that the playing field for raising capital as food entrepreneurs is not level. 83% of the respondents who have experience in raising investments have encountered negative gender bias when pitching to investors. So again, I think these are quite interesting data that require certainly further reflection and action. Let's go to the next slide. So all of this prevents women innovators from bringing their ideas to the market, and the exclusion of women from agri-food innovation causes gendered innovation, which is scarcely responsive to their needs. Because if women are not taking part in innovation design and development stages, it is unlikely that their needs will be included in the output of the process. It's therefore important to break the vicious cycles of innovation that disadvantages women by being geared to men and keeps them out of co-creating and participating in the design and development phase. Let's go to next. But as I was saying before, fostering diversity and inclusiveness is not just ethical, the right thing to do, is also the smart thing to do. So here we have an economic study from the European Institute for Gender Equality, which estimates that improving gender equality in the EU could create consistent economic growth. So at an aggregate level, could lead to the creation of 10.5 million new jobs by 2050, which is quite an impressive figure, increasing total GDP by 1.95 to 3.15 trillion euros. So this is quite significant. And also at a more granular level, investing in women is a smart thing to do from a business standpoint. For example, a McKinsey study indicates that businesses with a healthy balance of men and women are 50% more likely to outperform their competitors. Or, for example, startups founded or co-founded by women perform better over time and generate 10% more cumulative revenue than those of their male counterparts. Next slide. So, to conclude, just a few words on what we are doing at EIT Food to ensure the inclusivity of the innovation process. So first of all, we are working to ensure that our startup support programs are indeed inclusive. So we see today an equal representation of males and females in the early stage startup support programs, but still we see fewer female participants in growth and scale stage support programs. So we are working to address these gaps with the participants and our colleagues. We are also running two programs focusing specifically on empowering women. One is the EVA program, which stands for Women Empowering in Agri-Food, which promotes inclusivity and diversity between business founders and increase opportunities for female founders startups. So in these programs, we have 80 women that are being upskilled in entrepreneurship, receive personalized mentoring, training, and access to prizes to accelerate their innovations, and as well as matching opportunities with investors and business angels. The other is the We Lead program, which is an education program which aims to create a network of women leaders who wish to drive change, innovation, and sustainability within the food sector. So this program is designed to offer early and mid-career researchers and professional women opportunity to explore and develop their entrepreneurial and leadership self, address systemic issues, define their vision for a more sustainable food system, and devise a plan for the change that each of them wants to drive. So these are some of the initiatives that we are taking. And to conclude, if we go to the next slide, so to create change, we must unite all the major players across the agri-food sectors, farmers, industries, consumers, policymakers, scientists, innovators, with an equal representation of men and women to ensure that their respective needs and interests are taken into account in the innovation process, in the transformation process, to build an inclusive and sustainable food system, but also to achieve the full impact potential of innovation, which we wouldn't be able to achieve if we leave women out of the picture. Thank you, and over to you, Lara.
So thank you very much, Giovanni, for the insightful presentation and for setting up the scene for us. Now we will be moving to our panel debate, and I'm very glad to be welcoming to our brilliant panelists for the discussion. Here we have with us Ms. Simonetta Manfredi. Simonetta is Professor of Equality and Diversity Management and Associate Dean for Research and Knowledge Exchange in the Business School at Oxford Brookes University in the UK. She is also the founding director of the Oxford Brookes Centre for Diversity Policy and Practice. She has published widely about these topics, led several projects funded by a range of organizations, which include the European Commission, and she's also the author of Managing Equality and Diversity book, published by the Oxford University Press. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Simonetta. Thank you for joining. We also have with us Mrs. Dara Nikolova, Finance Advisor from the European Investment Bank. Dara is a corporate finance and strategy professional that has been helping organizations to grow and capture new business opportunities for the last 15 years. At the European Investment Bank, specifically on the Innovation Finance Advisor Division, Dara advise SMEs that seeks financing for innovation, for innovative projects that advance on the key EU priorities. She has also extensive experience in financial services and technology across Europe and the US in various roles at Morgan Stanley, Hamilton Lane, Advisor, Microsoft, Google, and SES. Welcome, Dara. Really a pleasure to have you with us today. Finally, we have also Ana Ogar, the Chief Executive Officer of Insights Lab. Dr. Ogar is the CEO of Insights Lab. It's a startup operating in the field of innovative components for specialty chemistry, and also is the CEO of MicroPlus, which is a biotech startup for agri-tech applications. She's also a doctor from International Doctoral Studies at the University of Berlin, Jagiellonian, and the University of Örebro, and is the author of numerous publications on environmental and industrial microbiology. Thank you very much, Ana, and also a big pleasure to have you all here. So let's start on some of the questions. Ms. Simonetta, why does diversity and gender equity especially matter in innovation?
Thank you, Lara, for the introduction and also for inviting me to contribute to this panel. Innovation is a result of ideas, discoveries, research, which is aimed at solving problems and addressing people's needs. People's needs are different. Giovanni, has already touched on this. Men and women needs are different. Therefore, diversity needs to be absolutely the diversity of the innovators at the core in order to respond to those different needs. Let me give you an example, which I think is quite powerful. It relates to a different sector, but we're all, the seat belt, which we all use daily and keep us safe when we are in the car, was actually developed as a technology in the late, in 1959, 1960s. But it was developed by men to keep safe men, pretty much, because it was developed with the male body in mind, not the female body in mind. Therefore, it did keep people safe, but it wouldn't keep safe a pregnant woman. And it took almost 4 decades, in fact, slightly over 4 decades, for a female engineer to realize that the seatbelt, as it had been designed, it wouldn't keep safe an unborn child. And therefore, the technology was improved in design. I think this is really quite a powerful example of, Giovanni alluded to the importance of the output. So if you don't have that diversity of inventors who can think about the diversity of needs that needs to be addressed, we are really missing out on we are limiting the cutting edge of innovation that we can actually produce.
Thank you, Simonetta, for the powerful example. I think it was a very clear way of describing the gendered innovations that we have been living with. Okay, I will move then to Ana, as well as entrepreneurs, as a female entrepreneur and founder of 2 different businesses at least. Sorry. What do you think is the role of the women in the transition to this new circular economy and environmental sustainability?
Thank you for kind introduction, and hello everyone. We as the women should give an example that doing businesses is not related to the gender or sex. We should set ambitious goal, no matter in which field we operate. It doesn't matter if it's agri sector, biotech sector, and any others. And we should make those things really happen, because quite often we as women concentrate on the obstacles, but not on the final goals. And we doubt too much. And in a business, we should kind of be agile, make decision quickly, and be willing to take a risk, because none of the business is guaranteed to be successful from the day one. We should kind of encourage ourselves to believe that we can actually make things happen. And also what strikes me and surprises me quite often when I, for example, hiring people, that very often women are well educated with tremendous experience, but what is lacking is lack of self-confidence and self-worth, and they constantly doubt the abilities to kind of run the business, to like put all the pieces together, because they wanted to make things 120%. And sometimes making 80% is good enough to kind of set and reach all your goals. And I think that's what we should, as a women, think entering any kind of segment of industry, to kind of believe that the way we're thinking is the right one, and try to convince others that that is the right approach.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your experience and your perspective. I think that you probably has defined very well what many of us has felt in their own body on the past. So yeah, thank you for that clear example as well on your experience. Also, we have been seeing through research that entrepreneurship is, although the entrepreneurs are very collaborative between them, usually the road of the business or creating a business is quite lonely. It might be special that for women. Do you think, based on your experience, that there is enough support for entrepreneurs in all its diversity, widely available?
Loneliness, being as an entrepreneur, doesn't matter if you're female or male, ends up in a question that and a troubles that quite often you cannot discuss openly many aspects of your actions, business, strategic decision, and you have to deal with your own, with making choices, making decision. And I think creating this supporting environments with experience, mentors, advisor, but also entrepreneurs, is something that we should seek and try to engage ourselves more often in those discussions, to do not be left in an open ocean of loneliness. And definitely that needs to be improved, but also it's on our own side to look for contacts with people that have similar backgrounds, experience, and try to make those relations mutual.
Yeah, completely agree, Anna. I think you mentioned also the network, the need of having also people around you that is giving you example. Maybe that's also important point for women entrepreneurs, to have around role models and other entrepreneurs that has been passing through the same process. So I guess that's a little bit different maybe, but completely agree. Thank you very much. There is a last question I would like to ask you on the relation on the entrepreneurship as well, especially for this topic. Do you see, or where do you see the biggest gender gaps in the agri-food sector?
I mean, agribusiness is highly regulated. That not makes life the easiest. And I think what Giovanni mentioned at the beginning, financing businesses related to the food industry, biotech industry, require high amounts of money. And without that, you cannot persuade your ideas or dreams, because simply you need funds. And if research says that less than 20% co-founders with the female are founded, and just 3% only female founders are founded, that says something about the gender gap which starts at the beginning. And I think that's the most difficult part to overcome.
Thank you, Anna. I think, it's very, very clear. The data talk by themselves sometimes. So thank you for your view, interesting and really on to the point. Based on what Anna said, and also Giovanni, and the data that we have, I think by now we all acknowledge that the fundraising and the financing is the most tangible gender gap. It seems that year in, year out, the gender gap in venture capital investment continues to be a problem that women founders face. It seems that while the gender gap in other areas are going the right path, it seems that the disparity in funding seems to be stagnant. What is your view on that data? Could you give us a snapshot on how the women-led startups perform in receiving venture capital in Europe?
Thank you, Lara. I'm very happy to, I'm not happy to talk about the topic, but so at the EIB and my team, one of the things we do is specifically looking at this question: are there any funding gaps in specific areas? In 2020, we published a study looking specifically at the funding gap for female entrepreneurs, and since then, it's really given us good insights into the scale of the problem, and it's a big problem, and also hopefully a proposal for some solutions and how to address it. So when we looked, we had a very broad definition of what a woman entrepreneur was. We looked at companies all the way up to Series C, and it was just one woman on board would be considered to be female-led. And even with this very broad definition, only 30% of funding went to this female-led startups. Now, at the earlier stages, and we're talking here really about the entrepreneurs, the SMEs, some other studies that we've seen put it at, yes, the 2 to 3% in single digits of the funding going to female entrepreneurs. And the second thing that is also an important gap to highlight in this is the equity gap as well, because even within founding teams, women get less equity. And this matters because this means that later down the line, women actually have less wealth that they could then redeploy, fund other women, fund their next startup, and so on. I think it was something like 13% of founders are women, but they hold 6% of equity. And within the full teams, even though 35% of the team might be women, they only hold 20% of the equity.
Wow, thank you, Dara. I think that's very insightful data that really talk about the work you are doing that is trying to tackle a massive problem within the entrepreneurship and investment world. Where do you see, can you help us to understand the reason behind this funding stagnation? Does the problem rely in the person who makes the best decisions, which are predominantly male, or is, in your opinion, there is truly a lack of women ready for or looking for investment?
It's a complex problem, for sure. We did have some hypotheses and some ideas about what the problem was. You hear a lot about the pipeline. So are there enough women-led companies, and are enough of them raising funds? We found out that 30% of entrepreneurs are women. So that is already a discrepancy considering how much funding they receive. So I don't think that we can talk about there aren't enough women. They do tend to look for capital elsewhere outside the VC. So it might be family and friends. It might be just loans or this type of financing, which is actually expensive and doesn't help them scale. And the question is, why is that? Why aren't they reaching out to the VC investors? And really, there's three aspects. So in Europe specifically, some of the most active investors in female-led startups are actually quasi-government entities. If you think about Enterprise Ireland or BPI France, and while they're doing a tremendous work in supporting early-stage women entrepreneurs, their mandates don't extend further towards the scale-up side, and so this is already creating this gap of investment in available to women. On the private investor side, it is absolutely the fact that women tend to invest in other women. A woman VC is 3 times more likely to support a woman entrepreneur. And 10%, and I think in Europe, no, this is global data, it is at most 10% of venture capitalists are women. And this data that we heard from Giovanni earlier, that what was it, 85% of women felt bias in their fundraising. You hear this across the board. I've heard it explained as soul crushing, from female entrepreneurs pitching to a male investor. And this is particularly relevant, I think, in femtech, where there's just this massive gap of understanding. And there's a lot that can be done to bridge this gap, both by getting more women to be investors, but also creating this education about responsive investing, responsive to the needs of women and how women build companies, what companies they build.
Wow, really, really interesting what you are saying, that I think based on the data as well and on the qualitative feedback also from the respondents of our studio, you see that the problem is still very much interiorized into everyone in the sector. Like it's very, very into our DNA, let's say. Is there as well, do you see like this is going, because I see that's a massive problem that is not only in the agri-food sector, but you mentioned also the other side on the investment. Do you see a growth on the number of females that are going into financing career, or like the venture capital career, for example? As you said, that is very much linked, the number of female investing in other female?
We haven't looked at the data. We have worked with other, and there are people who are looking and trying to understand this. I know that there's definitely been an increase. And so just a couple of months ago, there was a big announcement of a fund in Iceland, per-capita, that was raised, I think something like, I should have it somewhere here. Oh yeah, 90 million fund. So quite significant amount of money that was not intended to go to female founders solely, but they tend to fund at least a third of their portfolio from their previous funds ended up being invested in women. So considerably better than just the average market. I think that we're going to see a lot more of this happening. There are barriers because it goes back to this access to the equal starting place. It is still very difficult for women investors looking to raise a VC fund. And because of these conversations, there is active support, and there are things happening in the background where it is like, okay, let's make sure that a woman trying to raise a fund is not negatively penalized because she doesn't have a track record in the way that it's defined or something like that. So we've seen some encouraging activities in that side.
I'm very, very glad to hear that, and really interesting, truly. Okay, in the benefit of time, I will move now to Simonetta, because on top of the financial gender gap, let's say, there is also a conflict sometimes with the agreement. There is no universal agreement on how should we address the gender imbalance in entrepreneurship and also in innovation. For example, the rationale behind this supporting programs only for women-led startups, or venture capitals only for women-led startups. And I had the opportunity to listen to your podcast about advancing gender equality through positive action. I would like to know, where do you believe we need to target the efforts? Is in which stage, let's say, and which type of effort, which type of supports will we be providing?
Okay, so what I would say is, first of all, what strikes me is I just completed with some colleagues a project which looked at academic entrepreneurship. Female scientists who then commercialize their research and set up companies through the university. And the agri-food is a sector that no doubt stand to benefit from female scientists, whether through academic entrepreneurship or startups. And what strikes me is that no matter whether we're talking about entrepreneurship in the general economy, different type of entrepreneurship, the problem seems to be exactly the same. And one of the key one is what Dara has very eloquently discussed to do with investments. So I would say that in terms of the effort, first of all, we should approach these problems from the point of view that there are structural barriers that needs to be tackled, and not from the point of view about of intervention to fix women. We often hear, women, I think there is a question in the chat, which I just looked at, women lack confidence, but how are we judging women? Are we judging them against the men's attributes, men's attitudes? What do we mean by confidence? Do we mean someone who tells us that he's going to change the world, or is it confidence someone who is much more cautious in their approach on how they present themselves? So that is quite an important point, I think. There are structural barriers there, and we must whatever intervention, whatever we do, and the effort needs to be focused on those structural barriers, and investment is one of them. In terms of a positive action, I think a positive action probably is needed. What the positive action is about is to try to accelerate progress. So if we take the example of the investors, which have the investment, which is a big problem, and no matter in which part of the economy you are as an entrepreneur, you'll come up to that. And it's absolutely shocking that a lot of resources, a lot of money, there is an issue of distribution here, is actually goes to men rather than it is not equally distributed in a fair way. So I think there needs to be initiatives which are specifically aimed at women. And I have been privileged to meet some women's investors themselves who are really shakers and movers and trying to address this problem, do initiatives, facilitate access to funding. And I think the European Investment Bank, I know, is also very focused on achieving greater gender equality. Now, some specific initiatives, perhaps some specific findings that should be reserved for women's entrepreneurs. Now, I can hear already people saying here, oh, but then you've given preferential treatment to women. That might be reverse discrimination. But when you see reports, like there was the latest one that I saw was from the Nordic countries, and we think about the Nordic countries as always being well ahead in terms of gender equality, but when it comes to investing in women, they are not, which reported that 92% of the capital funding goes to all men teams. 92%, that is quite shocking. So when we talk about trying to do things to give preferential treatment to women, who is getting the preferential treatment at the moment? I would say the men are getting the preferential treatment. So positive action is not about giving women preferential treatment. It's about trying to readdress the balance. And we need to do it quickly. As I said at the beginning, and Giovanni also alluded in his presentation, we need more women in the invention, in the innovation ecosystem. Otherwise, we miss out. We miss out on the quality of innovation. And the other things that I would add to this are also other things where we really need to put the effort. And one which you would think is obvious, we need to give women who are in this space, women more visibility. Because then having role models can inspire the pipeline, future generation of researcher or girls in schools. But still, I always am very surprised when I see sometimes his website of showing entrepreneurs, and they're all men. So and surely, I know there might be women are underrepresented, but there are a lot of them out there. Surely more effort needs to go in making sure that women are represented, even in things like images on website. It's really important because those images stick with us in our mind. And the very final point is about networking, the power of networking, creating of forum opportunities for increasing women networking. There is a European project called WeGate. It's an online platform, a free platform, which is funded by the European funding, and as that, it's really good in terms of providing that kind of space for networking, and also some of the initiatives like training, etc.
Thank you, Simonetta. It's really a shame that we always seems to be have a lack of time in this really interesting discussion, because I think we all will be much longer discussing on different angles to tackle this issue. And I really it was really insightful to hear about the structural barriers and with what we compare with, like the standards that are we comparing with. Really like the view on that. I would like maybe to ask you, the two of you, to finalize the panel, to give us your 3 recommendations. I think you already tackled some of that on your intervention, but could you give us maybe very short the 3 recommendations that you could do maybe to the audience in order to eliminate these gender gaps or facilitate the improvement, so we make the society, or the transition to the food system in particular for the topic, that leaves no one behind and really generate benefits for the society. Maybe Simonetta, as you were already speaking, do you want?
I think policymakers have an important role to play. For example, I'm very pleased that European Investment Bank is on this case, because they are really in a very powerful position to signal, for example, to investors, say, if you don't make a much more equitable distributions, then perhaps these companies should be penalized. So there should be a requirement that companies, the investors, distribute their findings, their funds in an equitable way, and if not, why not?
Brilliant, thank you. Lara?
Thank you, Simonetta. We do think this is we hope we can be part of the solution in that way. And, in addition to policy, and in addition to creating the space for women to really thrive, and this can come actually from a lot of things, maternity leave or parental leave, or a lot of these things have an impact on women as well. We do firmly believe in this ecosystem approach, and this is what's important, to have this conversation in all the 4. This is not about having a women's entrepreneurship conference. This is about bringing this discussion into the mainstream discussion whenever we're talking in any sector, in any context, so that people are aware of the biases, and so that women know that there are people who can help them. We are happy to discuss what are the best financing options, how can we help women get the funding, and really thrive. So yeah, thank you, Lara, for making sure that this topic is heard.
Yeah, thanks to you for improving. I think this is a way of really raising awareness. More of these forums probably should be happening, and that people of your brilliant career are also happy to participate on them. Also facilitates a lot to educate and to bring awareness of the situation. I'm afraid that we are already out of time, so I just would like to really thank the participation of Dara, Simonetta, and Anna, as well as Giovanni. I would like just to give a short wrap up on diversity, which we think, as we said at the beginning, is crucial to allow relevant innovation in agri-food, and we need to include both women and male in the process of designing, which it makes also the need to make a stronger the financing for the women agri-food businesses, including the farms and the R&D activities, and making sure the R&D and the new businesses includes gender perspective, so we can ensure that both genders are balanced, represented in the project teams, but also on the innovations created as an output, as well as creating a gender mainstream policy for all the activities. Okay, thank you very much again. It has been an absolute pleasure to share this with you, and I'm sorry for the delay. We are moving to a networking break right now, so yeah, just be engaged with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.